Hi everyone. Okay, so my name is Shweta, and today I'll be talking about accelerated experiential dynamic psychotherapy, also known as AEDP. I'll give a brief overview of its foundation, how it conceptualizes trauma and facilitates healing, and also briefly touch on training in AEDP towards the end. And a quick shout out to NYU for giving me this opportunity to engage with trauma work through this lens. So, getting straight into it, ADP was developed by Diana Fosha. It's an integrative and experiential model, which means that it basically draws from multiple different traditions, including attachment theory, which is a big one, emotion theory, and psychodynamic approaches. What makes ADP different is that its focus is not just on understanding distress, but on actively transforming it through an emotional experience within a safe therapeutic relationship. So, at its core, it's an attachment based model that assumes that healing happens in connection and that the emotional experience is the primary vehicle of change. So, ATP defines trauma not just by the event itself, but by the experience of trauma. And the definition that it follows of trauma is that trauma is basically the experience of being left alone with a lot of overwhelming emotion. And so, in this definition, and in this way, the central injury is the emotional isolation, which is being alone in something that was too much to process. Because of this, one of the core principles of ADP is what Diana Fosha calls undoing aloneness. This means that the therapist is actively helping the clients not experience these difficult emotions alone, and instead invites these emotions into the session within a safe and regulated relationship. So it also views emotions as fundamentally adaptive. Each emotion carries information and direction for healing. For example, fear signals danger, anger signals boundary violations, sadness signals a need for connection. And so, in this way, all emotions have a place and all emotions are welcome, broadly speaking, in the therapeutic relationship. Now, to really kind of understand this a little bit more, I want to pull up the window of tolerance, which is how we can look at trauma work a little bit more. Essentially, it assumes that when people are within this window and this sort of optimal zone, they can feel their emotions without being overwhelmed by them or without shutting down. Trauma, what it does is they shrink this window, and it often leads to either hyperarousal, like anxiety or panic, or hypoarousal, like numbness and dissociation. And a lot of times, clients often fluctuate between these. It's not one or the other. What ADP does, and a lot of other trauma therapies also do, is that they gradually try to expand the window and expand the capacity to feel these emotions. So this isn't done by forcing emotion, but by inviting emotion within like the therapeutic session and by co-regulation in the relationship. And because trauma often leads to disintegration of self, the aim is integration by helping emotional experience and body sensation, which is why ATP also borrows a lot from somatic therapy and somatic experiencing, and really focuses on the body, since a lot of the times, most times, trauma is stored in our body. So the body is a key part of ADP as well. Okay, so now that we've kind of gone over like a brief overview of ADP and its conceptualization of trauma, we can move on to how we are basically using ADP in session. And a big part of that is this triangle of change. It's called the change triangle of experience. It's a core concept in ADP, which describes three main states. So, very broadly speaking, um, our aim as therapists is, if we see the triangle, is to move further down in the triangle. So, state one is the defense and inhibitory emotion state, the top of the triangle. And clients often enter session in state one, a lot of defense, a lot of anxiety, intellectualization. In ADP, we try to see the protective aspects of these defenses and really understand the protective aspects of these defenses. And instead of trying to fight them or remove them, we work with the defenses. So, for example, if a client is naming avoidance, we really look at that avoidance and we say, like, can we notice how the avoidance has helped you survive and has protected you for so long? And really appreciate the presence of this avoidance instead of trying to remove it or saying that, oh, let's not avoid. Just look at it and name the protective function of it. What this does is sort of melt these defenses that show up and helps us again move closer to emotion and further down in the triangle. However, because trauma often makes it unsafe to feel emotions, when we move closer, it brings up inhibitory emotions or anxiety and emotions that are a little more easier to access, but often are hiding the gritty core affect below them. So, with these defensive emotions, the aim is to kind of regulate them and also, again, really try to understand them and give space to them as well. If a client is feeling anxious, we are regulating the anxiety, and at the same time, we don't leave it at that. We name that the anxiety is telling us something important. We look at the anxiety, we frame it in a positive way, and ask to look below it. That sort of helps us move further down in the triangle where we really get to the core affect, which is a lot of time looks like grief, anger, fear, and all these other emotions. And in the session, we stay with these emotions and really feel these emotions fully with the client, allowing the client to also feel these emotions fully and be with them in those emotions. And when the client is able to do that, when they're able to feel these core affects, we bring ourselves into the room and ask them to take our presence in, to take the fact that we're feeling these emotions with them so that they don't feel alone in that experience and that it feels safe to feel these emotions. What this essentially does is, firstly, it provides a very big corrective experience for when emotions weren't safe and now they are in this relationship, there is safety, and there's a corrective experience of feeling emotions in a safe environment. And at the same time, it undoes the aloneness that clients often face during traumatic experiences. And finally, it releases the emotion. And when the emotion is released, we reach state three, which is transformation. And the transformation state includes positive emotions like relief, compassion, gratitude, clarity. And a big aspect of ADP is to also deepen the positive emotions. So just like we stay with the core emotions, we also stay with the sort of transformational state and stay with that relief, staying with the gratitude that's coming up, which kind of opens room for the true self, which is like calm, curious, confident, connected. And that's a big part of ADP. And obviously, healing isn't linear. Similarly, moving on this triangle isn't linear. We flexibly move between these states. But the main aim is to just move further down in the triangle, feel the core emotion, and release the emotional tendencies so that we can reach transformation. So now that we've sort of spoken about what we're trying to do in the session, I'm going to speak a little bit about how we do that. Of course, like everything else, there are a lot of different skills that ADP therapists use, and I can't cover all of these skills, but I'm going to try to highlight some of the main ones. The one really important one is tracking moment to moment and really staying in the present with the client. So noticing like, oh, I see tears. I see a big sigh. See your hands are shaking. What is coming up right now? What are you feeling in this moment? Can we turn inside and see right now what's happening? So really tracking moment to moment to kind of see that below the content, what emotion is coming up and what signals the body is telling us, and even the tone of the client or eye contact, stuff like that. And that allows us to kind of be really attuned with the client and make them feel less alone. And then also open up room for feeling and core affect and reaching to the emotion. There is somatic tracking, there's an explicit focus on the body. When emotion comes up, we turn inside. We try to track these emotions and how they're felt within the body. So if sadness comes up, we ask the clients, like, where do you feel it in your body? What is the sensation? Can we track if it's in our chest, if it's in the stomach? And then just staying with that instead of just moving past it, staying with that for 10 seconds and deepening it. So just seeing what happens if we stay with that sensation, just give it space, noticing it, and in that way, we're able to sort of deepen them within the body so that the body starts feeling safe again. ADP is also really big on relational work. It's a relational therapy. And we as therapists are fully involved with our clients. We come into the work. We are genuine with the client. There's offerings of self-disclosure about how the clients move us, like we move the clients. It's in that way very bi-directional and really has a strong emphasis on the therapist's sort of emotional presence, as well as the therapist's capacity to stay grounded and regulated while experiencing these sort of tough emotions with our client. And we're able to name that. We're able to tell our clients that, wow, I'm feeling so protective over you right now. I feel so much sadness. I feel like this pit in my stomach. And sort of really bringing ourselves into the work and opening up room for them to also feel their emotions, but also feeling less alone as they do so. And finally, one really big skill that I want to highlight is meta processing, which is kind of just reflecting on the change itself. So, for example, if your client comes in with a lot of defense and avoidance, and we kind of are able to work through that, melt that avoidance a little bit, move to maybe anxiety that shows up, regulate the anxiety, name the anxiety, see the what the anxiety is telling us, move to the core affect, feel the grief that comes up with our clients, and then maybe the client is like a sigh, which is often a sign of relief, and we track the relief in the body, we stay with the relief, and that's sort of like a big curve of the change, the triangle of change. So after that's done, even if it's not till state 3, even if it's just till state 2, we just feel the core emotion, there isn't a relief right now, we kind of reflect on that, and by just saying, how was that, what did that feel like to do, we went from A to B to C, how was that experience? What did it feel like to do it with me? And what that really does is sort of really set the change in by putting words to it and help with like reintegration even more. So the main aim, or the main kind of what this helps with ADP does, and moving through this triangle of change using these skills, what it really does is that through this process, emotions that were once overwhelming and fragmented become integrated. The window of tolerance increases. We're able to help clients feel their emotions and tolerate them, and increase that window of tolerance. And instead of emotions being something they avoid, it's something that clients can feel and process safely. And it often leads to greater emotional flexibility, resilience, and a more coherent sense of self. And the core idea essentially is that feeling leads to healing. So when experienced safely, transformation follows. That is sort of like a really broad overview of ADP and its conceptualizations. Obviously, there's a lot of training that's required to become skilled in these. And talking a bit about training programs are offered by the ADP Institute and often consists of foundational, intermediate, and advanced levels. So in the foundation level, there is immersion, which is a 5-day training by Diana Fosha herself or by Jerry Lamagna. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but who's a senior faculty at the Institute. And it's a 5-day, like I said, training to just kind of understand the core theory and techniques. After immersion, there's the intermediate training, which is essential skills and really like focusing on each skill and in small groups, like really practice those skills. And then the advanced training, which deepens more practical expertise, real world application, a lot of complex casework and specialized skills. And for certification in ADP, you need to do the immersion, the essential skills, advanced certification, and supervision. Supervision by an ADP certified therapist is a really important aspect of being certified yourself. But the immersion is a good place to sort of start. That's the first step. And these trainings are very experiential. They include a lot of like video reviews, skill practices, and again, ADP has a strong emphasis on the therapist's sort of emotional presence as part of the work as well. And you can definitely find a lot more information, videos by Diana talking about ADP, podcasts, and stuff like that on the ADP Institute's website, but also YouTube, Diana Fosha. You'll probably find a lot of videos that can sort of also just give a deeper understanding before going into like a formal training. But yeah, that's sort of ADP at like a very broad way of um, practicing therapy. It's even though it's focused on trauma work, it's also used for different types of pathologies. And yeah, it's an emotion focused work. That was sort of an overview, and I hope that this talk was insightful. Thank you.